We run a network of sites and events covering all aspects of the commercial models around apps, so helping people find the right advertising partner or helping people to promote and market their apps, really all the commercial aspects of the app business. I previously spent some time on the publisher side working at The Guardian, which not only has one of the top grossing paid apps in Apple Newsstand and on the iPad as well, but also has one of the largest inventories of mobile advertising probably in the world. Huge 8-figure base of unique users on mobile, multiple range of different native apps as well, and worked very closely looking at how to maximize revenues from both of those sources. Tried all kinds of different models over the years, right from the early days. So yeah, both sort of overview and publisher side. Yeah. Well, I think the first thing I want to say is that the business model is different from the revenue model. So revenue model is things like, are you using advertising? Are you paying a subscription? Are you paying for a transaction? Are you physically buying something? Are you getting a commission? Are you doing licensing? And there's really only there may be variants which bring it up to 50, but there's really only 7 or 8 revenue models. And what's more important is the wider business model. So a guy called Alex Osterwalder, who is one of the experts in business models, he says, I think there's like 11 aspects to a business model. And one of those is revenue model, but the others are things like what your customer segments are, what channels you're using to reach those customer segments, the relationship you have with those customers, the assets that you bring to that relationship, and the value proposition you're offering. So as a developer, I think people shouldn't get too obsessed with advertising versus in-app purchase or various variants within that, which are important, and we'll come on to that. You've got to think about the value you're delivering and to what audience. A more sort of holistic way than just how you're charging people for that value that you're delivering. So you mentioned Supercell and King. They're generally seen as leaders in in-app purchase, but they're not just successful because they happen to use in-app purchase. There's a lot of things they have in this wider business model that support that revenue stream. So it's things like the customer relationship they have. They're able to create that sort of magic where at the point of the user playing the game and the in-app purchase is presented, they're willing to spend. That's far more important than just the fact they're using in-app purchase. Or for example, the analytics is one of their sort of key resources or capabilities. They're able to track exactly what's happening in a game, and before they even release a game, they've worked out, okay, what's their 1-day, 7-day, 30-day retention, and optimize it, have that all working well before they release it en masse. And again, that supports the in-app purchase business model. It's more than just what particular way you have of charging people. Equally, things like the customer base, they have deep customer relationships, mainly in developed markets where people have money to spend. All that underlies the success of the in-app purchase model. I would say it's all about finding a mix of who you're targeting, what you're offering, how you're doing that, and then make the choice to use these different variants. So another example might be, I was talking last night to one of the heads of Turner Broadcasting, who own things like CNN or Nickelodeon. I think maybe it's one of their cartoon-based channels. And for them, they already have the TV they can promote things on, their trusted brand. So things like maybe subscriptions or again purchases are really good for them. Or equally, at my former employer, The Guardian, they already had an ad sales force. Or a guy I was speaking to last night from Global Radio, they have 600 ad sales people. Well, of course, advertising is going to make sense for them. So really what I'm saying, it's the wider context behind the revenue models. It's really, engagement, because it doesn't matter what your eCPM is or what your sell-through rate is in advertising, it doesn't matter what your uptake of in-app purchases if you don't have any users. So the absolute first thing you've got to look at is, okay, as I was saying, day 1, day 7, day 30 retention. Who's, after downloading your app, even opening it again, and that sort of thing. That's kind of increasingly key metric before you start looking at monetization. And then, within monetization, and often we get a lot of people approaching us in my business at the moment saying, well, we have an app, we have apps, how do we make more money? How do we increase the fill rate? What about the CPM? Who's offering the best CPMs? And it's kind of putting the cart before the horse, because until you have a large base of engaged users, just increasing one of those other metrics, it's not going to move the needle. You're just over optimizing way too early. But once you do have a large pool of engaged users, then you're looking at a range of those metrics in advertising, which add up to your revenues. That's fill rate, that's your CPM, and the volumes you've got of that, which is delivering the revenue. The other point I would make on advertising is increasingly there's a range of different formats involved in, say, an app. So even the concept of eCPM or your sort of revenue per thousand views isn't quite right, because you're not just serving banners across X thousand page views anymore. You may have an ad which pops up when you first open the app. You may have banners during the gameplay. You may have an offer wall with a range of different apps in between the level, and then interstitial when you've completed a game, you're about to close it. So it's becoming even more complex in terms of working out the yield when you have that many different formats available.